Today, we are diving into two of the most pressing real estate issues that are sliding under some people's radar. Part one, we'll be talking about real estate scams, and I'll be joined by ACME 805's broker associate and team lead, Lucy Oliveira. Part two is about the future of IDX, MLS, and AI. I'll be joined by Bill Fowler, a leading tech strategist and business strategist out of Dallas, Texas. Today asks the question, where are our blind spots? And at what point can we admit that we have been conned? Welcome back to The Clean Clothes. Okay, first I want to start by telling my own personal story, or shall I say a story about a girl who bought a house that had a big backyard and she wanted a pool. And that girl was me. I've been in real estate for 21 years. I work with lots of contractors. We do tons of renovation resale. I know what questions to ask, and I feel like I'm the man for this job, right? So I interviewed multiple different companies, all licensed, bonded, and insured. And to make a long story short, I chose one. The first day, the boss, the guy who was the sales agent, assigned me a project manager. I signed a contract that had a pay schedule. And at the beginning of any big construction project, there are permit fees. In the case of a backyard, hillside, pool kind of situation, you have to do soils testing. There's topography reports, all different kinds of city-related departments that need to approve the permit before construction can begin. There are also professionals like engineers that need to be paid in order for these reports to be generated. So I had an extremely attentive project manager who was just such a nice guy. Showed me pictures of his girlfriend, was always super friendly, took his shoes off at the door. He was like, listen, this is going to be a great experience for you. I'm going to take care. I even met him at one point at a pool tile place in the valley to pick out the pool tiles. They did this beautiful 3D rendering. I was feeling really good about it, and I was paying on the schedule. At one point, probably about 6 months in, and on LADBS, you could see that some permits were being pulled. So I did do my due diligence in that I was making sure things were happening, even though they weren't shown as finalized or anything like that. Anyway, long story short is, I get a call the day after, and he says, oh, I fell on my work site, and you're going to have to deal with my boss now. He's going to take back over this job. And I'm like, oh my God, you fell? You're in the hospital? That's awful. You know, I was feeling bad for the guy. So I called the boss, the guy who had originally met with me way back when, and he was like, yeah, I just got that same phone call. And I'm like, yeah, so where are we now? I've wired so much money. Like, when are we going to see the dumpsters? And he's like, what are you talking about? We only have $30,000 from you. I'm like, no, I've been paying on the schedule. And he's like, no. And then it started to gently unfold like a trauma response that I had just been majorly conned. The guy stopped responding to text messages. Right now, to this day, he has an Instagram account. I know where he is. He is in Florida. He has done this apparently to other people, but you know, it kind of almost feels when you're being scammed like being raped or something like that. Like, I let this person into my home. You know, I trusted him. We worked together for over a year. I wired funds to him. I trusted him. And the owner of the company, who I thought was the owner, was kind of like, well, you know, we can finish the job for you and you can just pay the rest of what's due. I'm like, wait, what? I'm not going to throw good money after bad. So I went to the LAPD. LAPD told me that because it is part of a business contract, that I would have to go through attorneys in order to try and get my money back. That they weren't going to take this on as any kind of criminal case. So I called my attorneys and we started the lawsuit. In the process of going through the attempt to recollect my money, they shuffled around the principles, and I learned that in California, one contractor with a contractor's license can rent out his license number to multiple other people who can then make bids on work with a contractor license. And that bond, that licensed, bonded, and insured, it's only $25,000. Certainly not enough to cover the injury that I suffered as a result of the fraud. Now, in California, according to my lawyers, there's also a law that says that a company is responsible for the behavior of its employees, which this guy was. I have his business card, and again, I have all the contact information. I have everything. And still, after 4 years now of trying to get my money back and spending a lot of money trying to do so, my lawyers called and they said, hey, I just want to let you know, even if you win, which you very well could, there's no legal way that we can actually make them pay. As in, the company can cancel their license, they can go out of business, declare bankruptcy, start a new company, and, I'm basically shit out of luck. I'm like, how can this be? So I saw a news article, and it was a similar contractor scam story, KTLA news article, and in the comments section, there were hundreds of people commenting, this happened to me, this happened to me. It is a major thing. I don't know if it happens everywhere. It definitely happens in California. These contractors are scamming people. And I felt like it was important to share the story now that I've been advised to kind of like stop the active lawsuit. I feel like for a lot of people, there's nowhere to go. I went on the website for the Contractor State License Board, right? And there's actually a line in this, you can file a construction complaint. And there's a line on their website that says the primary purpose and highest priority for CSLB is the protection of the public. Okay, great. However, the purpose of a CSLB investigation is not to obtain restitution. And a CSLB investigation does not guarantee complainants will receive a restitution. So they say it right there on the website that they have no authority to actually get you your money back. I feel like this is a buyer beware situation that nobody knows about when they're hiring contractors to work on their houses. They do not know that if that scope of work is more than $25,000, that there's literally no way to get your money back. If somebody has a suggestion as to an alternate route to get the money back, I would love to hear it. I Googled the guy's name just to see if he re-upped his Instagram account and he had it. And then I also saw that he was in some poker competition. So I'm like, I wonder if he was trying to pay a gambling debt or, if somebody broke his knees because he didn't pay them or something. And I'm praying to God that there's some karmic, retribution that's in the works in the future. But I realized through my investigation of this and hearing the stories of lots of other people that they're afraid to say the names of the companies that conned them for fear of retribution, and they have nowhere to turn. Like, they really feel like there's no authority in the state of California that can actually help them get their money back or hold these people accountable. So that is the first con. Okay, but there's more. In a recent December 30, 2025 article, this California Association of Realtors released some information regarding vacant land scams. Here to discuss this topic is ACME 805's team lead and broker associate, Lucy Oliveira. Welcome to the Clean Clothes, Lucy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, such a pleasure. So I got this December 30th, 2025. It was actually Department of Real Estate, not CAR. It was Department of Real Estate Licensee Advisory, and it said the California DRE is urging licensees to be on the lookout for bad actors posing as owners of vacant land and contacting real estate agents for their assistance to sell a property they do not own. You had this happen to you, right?
I did, unfortunately.
Yeah, can you tell us what happened exactly?
Yes, actually, it was something that it's never happened to me before. I've always thought I was smarter than these people, but sometimes they're smarter than you too. It was very straightforward. Someone reached out to me through Zillow. I've got lots of leads through websites, my website, other websites. And they're like, hey, I'm looking to sell this property. They knew every detail about this property, their names, everything matched. They told me when they purchased, what the intentions were when they purchased. We had really good conversations. And I was like, you know what? Let me go look at the lot. I'll see what I can do. Went to look at the lot. This lot was actually located in Santa Barbara, and everything matched. He had sent me images from, the lot and the previous, sale when he purchased. So we, signed the listing agreement.
Did you at any point ask him to verify his identity, like with a license or any other document? I mean, do you usually ask people who are selling their houses to give you their license?
No.
No, we don't do that.
No
It's
one
not
does
like a thing most people do.
Right. But I tried to get in a Zoom call with him, and he was sick in the hospital. And that should be in my first red flag. But the thing is, this guy had an accent that matched his name.
What was his name?
The voice, everything. He had like a Russian name.
Okay.
And he had an accent, and he sounded very sick. I don't know if they use like a machine that changes their voice, AI, I don't know. But I would have been able to think about it and think, maybe this is a little fishy if those things didn't match. But he sounded like he was sick. He would be coughing on the phone. And I called this guy many times. We always answer. He's always really polite. He'd always get back to me. And emails, all of that. So we went ahead and listed this property. Didn't ask for an ID.
How much money did you spend on marketing the property?
Well, I probably spent about $1,200.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not nothing.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lot either.
Right.
I tend to spend a lot more than that in
residential.
Some of my residential listings.
For sure.
And that's the other thing. This was my first lot I ever sold, so I didn't really have an experience and even thinking about, hey, can I get a copy of a driver's license and your wife's? Nothing. So we went on. I listed the lot. We had it on the MLS. I showed this lot multiple times to multiple investors and builders and contractors in Santa Barbara, LA. People are calling me from everywhere. And time went on. I would check in with him weekly. And it was a very regular connection I had with this client. I spoke with him on the phone weekly, emails. He would always be really responsive, really nice. Rarely I called him, he didn't answer, which was, I didn't think about time zone or anything like that. So everything seems normal. I showed this lot many times. I showed this lot to local investors and builders in Santa Barbara, neighbors. I talked to the neighbors. No one ever seemed alarmed about anything. So we went on until we actually got an offer, and we went under contract. And even then, everything was going really smooth.
So was he, once you got into escrow, was he actually communicating with the escrow company in a normal way as well?
Yeah. He responded to their emails. I saw them talking on trying to schedule a time to hop on the call so the escrow officer could kind of give him the rundown of here's the next steps, here's what we need from you. And thankfully, this offer we received was with an agent that is a local agent in the area, and he was the listing agent to the same lot years before.
Oh, okay.
So he knew this lot, but he doesn't know the buyers because the buyers came in with their own agent. So he's like, oh wow, they're selling this lot again.
Wait a second. The escrow agent?
No, the listing agent.
I thought you were the listing agent.
No, I'm the listing agent, but he was the previous listing agent for the same lot. The guy that brought the buyer.
The buyer's agent had previously listed the same lot that you're listing with the con guy.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. So he knew this lot. And escrow calls the guy, and she's like, hey, we want to kind of make a plan to get a notary over. It's really early in the transaction, but you're out of state, so we want to plan. This is what we need to happen in order for us to close when that time comes. It was like a 20-day escrow. That's when he was basically, telling her, well, my health is really bad. I can't have anybody at my house. I am, I've been advised by my doctors not to be in contact with anyone because I was in the hospital for a long time. And she's like, that's okay. We can actually confirm your identity and do a notary virtually now because there's ways to do it through Zooms.
Right. That's
Call.
new.
Yeah, that's kind of new because I feel like there's so many more people out of state too. And, sometimes they are.
No, I mean, our industry has been waiting for a kind
Yeah.
of digital ID verification
Yeah.
so people can close
Yeah.
remotely. I mean, we're all excited about that, honestly.
Yeah,
But
and that works.
with AI, I'm sure that presents its own challenges too, because if you can manufacture a new face, you can manufacture an ID, so this,
Yeah.
I think we're not ready for it yet, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I cannot even imagine what that's going to look like. But
Yeah.
so when she pitched that idea, he was like, well, my internet connection is not that great. He basically started creating problems. And she was like, okay, let me see what I can do. So she calls me right away. And she's like, you know what, Lucy, I have some really concerning thoughts about this client because he's creating problems
Right.
when it comes to verifying his identity and getting a notary there or having a notary come online. Now, if he can send you an email, he can FaceTime, he can do a Zoom,
Right.
and if he doesn't, he can sort it out a way to do it. I mean, we have the technology where you can get satellite internet in the middle of nowhere right now. So,
Right.
that wouldn't be an issue if he really needed to sell this property. So she was the one that kind of started to notice the red flags based on that conversation that she had with him. So I said, interesting. So let me call him. So I call him right away. And I'm talking to him and I'm like, I understand what you are. Like, I'm sorry that your health is so debilitated to the point where it's becoming really challenging for you. But all of these protocols are in place to protect the consumer, to protect you, to protect me, to protect everyone involved in the transaction. And escrow also has its own protocol that they have to follow. So if we can't do that with this escrow company, we're not doing this at all. Because he wanted me to find another escrow company.
Right, I remember that.
That would
so, quick question for you. Did you ever get a physical address for this guy?
yeah, and it matched.
It matched.
Yeah,
So you were escrow was actually sending physical documents to an address.
they hadn't sent anything yet, but it was the address. Everything matched what the information that we had for the title and the property tax and everything.
So how did you ultimately end up figuring out that he was a fraud? Other than when he said find another escrow company, you said I can't. At what point did you know this guy is the con man?
When I told him, I am not. I said to him on the phone, I know you are trying to find another ways, but there is a reason why we're doing this way because we want to avoid scams and frauds, and that happens all the time. And we have a whole system in place to avoid anything like that happening. And in the moment that I said fraud, he hung up on me. And that's when I knew. I immediately knew.
Got him.
I was like, wow, call him again. Because I was like, okay, maybe, the call dropped. Call him 3 times, nothing, silence. So I called the escrow officer and I said, I think you're right. Because, I explained to her what had just happened and how I mentioned fraud and scam, and he hung up on me. He knew there was no other way around because I wasn't going to do what he wanted me to do.
Right.
And then he just shut down completely.
Wow. And you never talked to him since?
No.
So in this article from the DRE, it says request an in-person or virtual meeting to see proper government-issued identification. I mean, I think some people are probably, some sellers, if you ask them that, they'd be maybe weirded out by that. I'm not sure. It says, if possible, make and retain a copy of the government-issued. Let me just take a picture of your ID right now.
Yeah.
I don't know, weird. Request a copy of the most recent tax bill or utility bill for the property. If they won't meet, require them to utilize the services of a third-party identity verification service provider, conduct an online search and find their pictures and see if that matches the person that you're talking to, send a copy of the electronically signed listing to the address of record with a request to confirm the listing's accuracy via overnight mail. Require the property owner provide a copy of a voided check. Use a wire verification service or confirm wire instructions match account details on the seller's disbursement form. Those are some of the suggestions they make in order to prevent agents from being conned. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you have anything to add to that as a warning to people as we wrap up this segment.
I feel like it's really simple. One of the things that I learned from this, it's especially when it comes to land. Yes, follow some of these advices, because I called the CAR hotline to kind of figure it out what I needed to do, because I had to file a police report after that.
Oh, you did end up filing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and I had an investigator come to my house, sit across from me at my dining table, and I told her everything.
Okay.
And they took it, and they're like, we're not going to really investigate because nobody lost any money. Everything
You did.
was done. I lost a little bit of money.
You did.
But my most important thing is that the buyer didn't, and
Well, no, I mean, I think we're victims of this shit too.
we are. We absolutely are.
Yeah.
And for me, moving forward, if I ever have anything like that happen again, I will not get a listing unless I meet with them in person. If they want me to list it, they need to fly here to come meet me. I don't even want to see the ID because that's what it takes. You know what I mean? And if someone's serious, I am not willing to risk going through this again, or maybe jeopardize someone else's financial or mine again, if someone's not willing to meet me in person, or at least help me with identification and make sure that they're who they are.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much for joining us on the Clean Clothes to share that story. Oh, warning out there, man. I think people are getting desperate. This is happening all over California, but probably all over the country. And, I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made. I have some other ideas too, because it's not just real estate agents getting conned, homeowners are getting conned, like me. And, there's just very little by way of legal, consumer protection, really. You think the government has a mechanism for this, but even the police are like, there's not really much we can do. And that really sucks. It just shows you that this system was set up to have us lose. And I think that needs to change.
I agree, 100%. Thanks for having me today.
Yes, we'll be right back. Eric Johnson of Compass, friend of the show, past guest, recently posted on LinkedIn that for 20 years, agents have been squeezed while the public debates commissions. He says NAR dues, MLS fees, desk fees, tech stacks, lead platforms, portals taking 30 to 40% of referral fees. The machine taxes every transaction from every angle, he writes. And here's the part nobody says out loud. When agents get squeezed, consumers suffer. For our next topic, is the MLS a scam? Should we add this to our real estate scams? I'm not really kidding, but I'm kind of kidding. Here to discuss the future of MLS, our IDX leases, and AI is tech strategist and business strategist Bill Fowler of Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the Clean Clothes, Bill.
Thanks, Courtney. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. I follow you very closely on LinkedIn, though I think I'm kind of like a Bill Fowler stalker. I don't know if I've ever commented on anything, but I really appreciate your attention to some very specific and important, lucrative spaces in our industry. Do you agree, just out of curiosity, with Eric Johnson that NAR and MLS are one of the many middlemen that are squeezing the agent to the consumer detriment?
It's a very difficult thing to say a binary yes or no to. I think it's situational. I think that NAR has painted themselves into a corner as far as the agent population goes, not really being able to state their true value proposition in a very clear way from coast to coast. So I'm not surprised by that comment. Mm-hmm. The MLS is a completely different ballgame. So to lump those two things together, I think is a little bit reckless, but I understand the sentiment for sure.
Yeah, let's break it down. Okay, so what do you think the value, just in our current moment, what do you think NAR's value is, if there is one?
Well, I think you could say that advocacy is the easiest thing to lean on. I'm not a flag waving NAR fan by any stretch, but I do think that what we have, we're entering a season where NAR's original charter was to just be an advocate for the industry as a whole. So if you've been to DC, I'm sure you've seen the NAR building, which is like across the street from the Capitol. It's got this giant R looming over like the Batman signal,
Yeah.
that's their greatest and highest and best use of their talents and skills. When they began making policy that affects the average home buyer and seller and affects the MLS, I think that they ran afoul of their original mandate. I think clear cooperation was clearly that thing that caused that to go away. And I'm
100%.
frankly, since I was at Compass when that all went down, and I have strong feelings about clear cooperation, and I'm glad that we're seeing kind of a sunset of NAR's ability to make coast-to-coast mandates on how people buy and sell real estate.
I could not agree more. And in fact, I feel like we are coming out of an era of, how do you say? I feel like when I spoke out against clear cooperation when it first came out, it was almost like a scarlet letter. Like there was a lot of pushback. Like the industry was like, this is how it goes and you don't have a voice. And they did not want anybody. It took so many years and so many lawsuits. So to that point, to even reinvestigate it, and even still, I mean, to that point where you said, NAR has deviated from its original mandate. Do you think that the advocacy recently that we're paying NAR to do has actually worked? Like, are they advocates for agents or are they advocates for home buyers and sellers? I think that's another piece that gets lost. What do you see they're advocating for? Is it working?
Not being a practitioner and, knowing a lot of really good people that still have the NAR logo on their chest and do the work and are earnest and advocates for the thing that pays us all indirectly. It's difficult for me to sit back and say that they can or can't or aren't or are doing what they should be doing. I can tell you that from my vantage point, the people that I know at NAR who are still operating, number one, the REACH program. Let's just use that as a shining example. I think the REACH program is a fantastic example of NAR at its best, meaning taking new technology, incubating that technology, and spitting out the other side value for the average real estate agent, and therefore the buyer and the seller. The advocacy part, I am thrilled to be ignorant of the lobbying that takes place at that level. But I know that state associations still hold their value, and therefore the tether up to Chicago. Again, it's so nuanced, and these tentacles are so broad and so deep. In my estimation, I think that the clear cooperation, while mandating MLS access was headed in the right direction, I think that the MLS should hold its own value without someone needing to wag their finger saying, you must use this. I think that should be self-evident that the MLS has its own value.
And it always has been. It always has been. That's the thing. We didn't need clear cooperation to tell us, oh, the more exposure a listing has, the higher price it might get, right? That's why
that's right.
Private listings.
And the numbers bear that out.
Exactly. The numbers totally bear that out. So it's like, why did they do this? I don't even know what the origins of it were. I heard lots of root stories. I've been deep diving into it. And at one point, I was told that this was in response to Redfin. Remember when Redfin first came out, there were like price, they weren't willing to show properties under a certain price point because Redfin has its profit model. And if houses were priced too low, then it didn't make sense for them to send an employee out to like sell that property. And people were saying, okay, we have an issue with fair housing. I heard it was in response to fair housing. And then they had to justify that. And then they were like, well, if some agents are off marketing so that they can discriminate, so that they're not showing property to everyone and only showing property to people of a particular persuasion or another, that's what we're preventing by keeping it public. And I'm like, I don't know who they interviewed for that because I have been selling real estate for a very long time. And my sellers, by and large, see green. And it's our ethical obligation to not discriminate on anybody's behalf. We don't need anybody to tell us not to. If there one time was a seller who was of a particular ethnicity and told one of my agents, I don't want to sell this to anybody of my ethnicity, okay? And my agent said, I'm sorry, I can't discriminate on your behalf, so I'll let go of the listing unless you see all offers and allow me to show to all people. And we lost that listing as a result of that, which is what I think most agents would do. And you know what I'm saying? So I feel like it was an unnecessary thing from the beginning, definitely an overreach, but in my humble opinion, not that you asked for it, NAR is confused about who they serve. So I think that's part of it.
To your point, I totally agree with everything you said, and I think your anecdote is I have a similar one. I was in the room in San Francisco when this was voted on, having just met with the San Francisco Association of Realtors, where this was not an issue. I mean, private listings were certainly an issue, but those two things were somewhat separate. Like the clear cooperation policy was a coast-to-coast mandate. Thou shalt do this at a certain period of time within a certain set of constraints. And in the large markets, this was water under the bridge. But in downtown, everywhere, USA, this was an unheard of policy that was given a deadline of compliance that was unreasonable. Suddenly, all the MLS vendors had to jump into action. Suddenly, everybody who was in regulatory had to jump into action. And I think overreach is a good term for that. But I do think that the idea that we should all be using the MLS and that transparency should run the day is absolutely airtight. That I believe that. However, I don't believe that NAR can tell a buyer or a seller how to transact business. That was the overreach.
Right.
So if I want to list my house on the MLS and I want to hide my address, that's up to me. If I don't want to list my house on the MLS as a seller, that's also up to me.
Right.
So again, I think all these things can be true at the same time. But I think that where NAR got themselves into trouble, in my opinion, is as a regulatory body, not as an advocacy body. So advocacy, we do well, and we should continue to do that. As a regulator, we got our hands slapped a couple of times, and now we don't want to ever do that again. So I'm here to tell you in front of the internet and everybody that NAR will never make another MLS-based mandate ever again.
Well, the damage, unfortunately, has been done, and you can see they're kind of licking their wounds a little bit. I'm curious to know what you think about the delayed entry. It took so long for NAR to even respond to the calls for, getting rid of clear cooperation policy, and then they're like, well, we'll concede this thing with delayed entry. And it seems like what they're doing now is going, okay, if we're going to take our hands off of this, we're going to give MLS the regulatory authority now. So we're going to make the local MLS in charge of exactly how long an MLS participant can post a listing as a delayed entry listing in the MLS prior to it having to go live. Did you see that whole news conference?
I'm going to be honest with you. I stopped listening to this online negotiation a while ago, only because we're negotiating in real time. And I think when we say the word MLS, there are 355 MLSs the last time I checked.
I know.
And the median number, meaning that there are as many on one side of this number as there are on the other side, is 1,000 or somewhere in that range. So I counted this yesterday, there are 741 MLSs, at least on my list, that are below 1,000 members. And so when we talk about creating policy that is sweeping the country, we're not just talking about Manhattan, LA, Dallas, Miami, and San Francisco. We're talking about Paducah, Kentucky. We're talking about Birmingham, Alabama. We're talking about places where you can't just flip a switch and change the way people do business. And so when we're creating policy, we just need, I think what's happening is, again, as I've described it, a real-time negotiation. We're changing the tires on a car that's moving 80 miles an hour down the street. And it's simply unfair to the marketplace at a time, I think, when the economy is at let's say, a tenuous position to create more convoluted transaction nuances for your average practitioner.
Well, not just the economy. If you take a broad view of this entire issue, right? It feels to me like the behemoth that is NAR and the MLS and the clear cooperation kind of dealing with these lawsuits is over here stuck in the mud, while ChatGPT and Zillow decide to sign something that jumps over any IDX licensing agreements and they just integrate, or Compass just literally publicly says, hey, we're not going to make our agents follow clear cooperation. You know, if they want to, they can. If not, they can. And then, you know, now, given the Anywhere merger, it's like what they say, to Eric Johnson's point, or what moves they make can have like a big impact on the way things are done. I feel like people are starting to just jump first, ask questions later, or what do they say when people, you know, you do something and apologize after, you know, whatever,
Right.
at first and apologize
Ask for
later.
forgiveness, not permission.
That part.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
that, exactly. So I feel like we're in this
Right.
era now where the technology and the possibilities of a future, a whole different system are becoming more realistic, and people are starting to lean into the future as opposed to trying to fix these problems of the past. So I have to ask you, what do you see the future of the MLS being? Is it going to be some continuation of what we've got now, or do you see open source MLS in the future? What do you think?
God, oh my, that's such a huge question. Yeah, well, let's go back to your comment about Zillow and OpenAI doing a deal.
Yes.
It makes headlines, and you know, my MLS executive friends are like, there's two camps here. There's a group of people, and I would say that the NFL markets, the CEOs in the MLSs in the NFL markets are very much paying attention to what's going on with the data that enters and exits their warehouse. And then the other 300 or so MLSs have no idea what you're talking about. Wow. So I think the future of the MLS is, number one, you can continue to say consolidation. This is a very tired term, but I do MLS strategic plans, part of my consulting business, and I travel around the country and help MLSs try to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. So this is a very important question that you're asking. And the answer to this is, the ones that are paying attention are going to survive. The ones that are going to react and hire an attorney to rewrite their IDX rules. Now, this is, you know, what we call tombstone technology. You know, once you have some sort of disaster take place, then you go back and you change building regulations, or, you know, you require seatbelts in cars. That's where we are right now, is we just got T-boned in the intersection of technology by Zillow and OpenAI, by Zillow saying, hey, we just did this. And it is clearly around the license agreement that Zillow has signed with every MLS. It's clearly a derivative work or a partnership that's, if not immediately, you know, in conflict with this agreement, certainly skirting the boundaries of this gray area of the language. 100%. And we have an IDX agreement that you may have read on LinkedIn that was made when, you know, I was just graduating college.
Right. It
Let's
was
not
like
talk about how
20 years ago or something, maybe 2005.
Yeah, a while ago. You know, back when I had a flip phone and Hootie and the Blowfish CD. So the point is that our licenses are stagnant because MLSs don't know what their value is, and their value is that data. Zillow certainly knows what that is. Realtor.com certainly knows what that is. Homes.com and so forth. So we are woefully behind. It's not that we can't catch up, but the ones that catch up are the ones that I mentioned, the CEOs that have actual technology people in their offices and run like businesses. Most MLSs run like nonprofits.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you make a good point. Like, all of the MLSs are kind of owned a little bit differently. And even when they say it's owned by the association, so, you know, NAR made a big announcement at their national meeting that they were going to decouple NAR membership from MLS membership. However, immediately I called our MLS, which is Claw MLS in LA, my MLS, and I said, okay, so if I decided to pull out of NAR, right, do you guys have access to the forms, you know? And they're like, no, you have to be a member to have access to the forms, which I kind of knew, of course, because they're CAR forms. But in the conversation around it, they were acting like there would be alternate ways for people to get the forms. So it was kind of a nothing burger news story to me, because I think as long as the forms belong to the association, and that's the dominant way of doing business, until there's some alternative to the CAR forms, people are going to continue to remain associated with both. So it was kind of an announcement, but not an announcement. It was like exactly what I expect out of NAR, delayed entry instead of canceling clear cooperation. It's like, this thing has cost us millions of dollars in lawsuits. It's cost a loss of faith and trust in the public eye. It's caused us, you know, people, respected journalists from the New York Times are sitting on nationwide TV shows calling my commission, the way I earn money, a tax on Americans. Like it had so many false news stories
Right.
around it. It was some crazy shit, and then, when you interview the CEO, she's like, we're going to handle this. We're going to be transparent. We're going to this, that, and the other thing. And, I've read the working group thing. They talk about how much money we have sitting in a bank account, making NAR a sitting duck, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm just saying it feels like there's so much mess over there. And the way that they've tried to tombstone
technology.
Technology, the reaction has its own problems. It's almost like you want to say, let's just tear this down and start over, because what I see, and again, I'm curious about your predictions, is that given this kind of language coming out of Compass and the way they're positioning, I've noticed a trend. There's a PR campaign or something that happens where all these Compass agents start coming out and saying something similar about maybe Zillow, or saying something similar about, MLS fees feeling like a middleman fee. And I'm like, are they foreshadowing some kind of a move? And so anyway, I can see a future where people are like, this is just too messy. Let's just have one nationwide open source MLS and be done with these local MLSs. We don't need them anymore. I mean, one thing that, to Zillow's credit, that it did where Realtor.com did not, is it created kind of a nationwide MLS. So if I could manually enter my listing into Zillow, why do I need the MLS? That's where buyers are looking.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and one that is asked on a routine basis when you run into red tape like you just described. Like, yes, I don't want to belong to the association, but they're like, okay, well, here's your car, but you can't have the keys.
Right, exactly. Like, what are you saying?
The MLS's core, once we take the compensation pillar out of the MLS, because it used to be compensation cooperation.
Right.
Cooperation is still a very big deal. And I appreciate that Robert, my former boss, has a certain persuasion about the MLS and would like it to all go away. I get it, and I understand why. Here's the thing. This is the linchpin of the MLS. Drum roll. It's the truth. So if we have an open source MLS, now suddenly we have Craigslist. So, and we're, the European markets who are studying the US market to try to figure out how to implement our MLS system, because we have the truth. So when you go and search your MLS, or when you search Zillow, or when you search any other resource that receives a data feed from the MLS, you almost don't even think about it, because that 3 and 2 down the street, that's $1.5 million, you're in LA, that's the truth. So it's a 1,500 square foot rancher, and it was last sold in 1987. That's true because it came from the MLS, and you can't put garbage in the MLS. Well, you can.
Well,
but
you can.
There are business rules that protect you from that. So if Robert or somebody else, or if CoStar wants to build their own MLS, great. Now you're the cops. Everybody wants to speed down the highway. They don't want to catch other people speeding. That's our core issue at the MLS.
Hold on. Let me just throw something else at you.
Yeah.
You know how Google's starting to dance in the space of real estate?
Mm-hmm.
If I knew that buyers in the future, maybe next year, instead of going to Zillow, would just Google what homes are on the market in the 90035, right, or whatever, and my listing was going to pop up in a Google search in a way that consumers actually were using, right? With AI, wouldn't accuracy be impossibly tied to the public records? I mean, all that data is there for verification as far as what the sales price is. And then I would also be able to personally brand myself. I would be able to offer a buyer agent commission, all the things that I can't do now as a result of the current structure. Don't you see that maybe being more of the future, like maybe Google or some alternative, less hands bound by MLS and IDX licenses kind of thing?
Yeah, true. Your point is well taken. I think public records would certainly be a resource. This is how Zillow started life, as basically a public records data scraper. And then they threw ads around it. Zillow will tell you they're not a real estate website; they're an advertising website, and it just happens to be real estate is their, content. But sure, I mean, in my experience, California public records probably pretty good. Next door in Nevada, they suck because they're updated every 6 months or something like that. I'm going to tell you, and this is because, I've been 25 years in the MLS space, and that's how I make my living. I'm going to advocate for the MLS as a pretty effective and really inexpensive value prop, as a cooperative, a place where you can share your listings. And it's the giant digital dining room table where you and all your friends get together and share assets and resources. And it's very inexpensive to sit at that table. And I think truth is our ultimate value. Okay, so that's where I'm going to hang my hat, because that's what I do, and that's where people. I do think that the model is broken in the way that these MLSs are not operating like businesses. They do not go out of their way to make your life easier. They are largely run, forgive my friends who I'm about to offend, as professional administrative offices.
Right.
They are not businesses. And so when you walk in the door, you buy a bundled service.
Right.
It's Comcast.
Right.
And so, on a surface level, your experience is largely anonymous, very two-dimensional. But when you need an exception, like when you want to add a channel or subtract a channel, back to Comcast. No, sorry, you can't do that. If you want to pull out of the association and state, nope, sorry, you can't do that. There is no flexibility in a modern sense. That's where I think our Achilles heel is that we operate on a monthly basis. MLSs make decisions like the freaking dinosaur level of, constraints of time, and they're not malleable, and they're letting Zillow and all these other, large companies run roughshod over their data. These things are changing. They're just not changing fast enough to accommodate your level of cynicism.
My level of cynicism. I'm just in the real world. I have.
I hear you.
For example,
agreeing with you, by the way. Everything you're saying, I agree with.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And it means a lot coming from you, because you're in the weeds with it. I'm not. I'm just a person out here trying to do a thing, And I will say, and I remember at Inman Connect years and years ago, they were talking about trying to set some standardized words for entry into the MLS and make some rules that actually make data analysis a little bit easier, because sometimes in one region we'll have 3 different MLSs or 4 different MLSs. I think we belong to 3 or 4 different MLSs just to be able to list a listing in Ventura County or Palm Springs or San Diego. When we're all in Southern California, it's it should not be this way. My proposal is a one state MLS. I said that to Victor too. He wasn't having any of that. But anyway, that for me would make my life and the amount I pay for this service and the data entry and the standards better, in my opinion. Because even with every MLS, what does an agent use the MLS for, right? We use it to list a property so that other agents in our network, through whatever platforms they use, be it the MLS or Real Scout or Zillow or Redfin or whatever they use, that their clients are seeing the property, they can see the property. But it's also so that when I can, hold on a second, I have to cough. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's all right.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just got back from the desert, like a cowboy ranch in the desert, and my dust is still in my lungs. Literally got back yesterday. I took my kids just to meet some camels and stuff. It was super fun. But unfortunately, I have gotten a little dusty cough. So I apologize. But when I think about what do agents actually use the MLS for? And what we really use the MLS for, in addition to that obvious listing IDX and that kind of thing, is we use it for the data. So when I'm looking to meet with a seller and give them a price on what I think the house could sell for, I'm looking at past sales. I'm looking at listing price versus sales price, days on market, and all that stuff. None of that information, aside from the closed sale price, is actually verifiable, because the way that the system is where I am, and it could be different in every MLS, is that the day count doesn't stop when you go under contract. They actually only stop it when you change the status to pending. And I have been bringing this up as a problem with the days on market data for years. They do not care. They're like, well, if you're actively marketing it for backup, it creates a conundrum, because the agent's incentive is a shorter day on market for marketing purposes, whereas the seller wants the agent to market for backup to get a backup offer. So this is what I mean when I say MLS advocates are always talking about the data being like the thing we can count on, the truth, as you say. But in fact, when you go on a more granular level into the actual data, agents are entering information in a myriad of ways. They don't enter concessions. We now can't see compensation. And on top of it, the days on market count is wrong. So I still see that unless there's a tightening up or some standardized rules across the board and common sense included in the way data is entered, there are still going to be problems with that system. Then I'm hoping you can tell me if there are tools that you're seeing, because I know you do a lot in AI, that are helping with the accuracy of what it is that we are getting out of our MLS data. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Did you know that YouTube has a new feature where audience members can actually hype up the podcast they love? Can you give your girl a little hype? If you love what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe, share with your industry friends. DM me if you want to be a voice on the show. I love talking with people. Obviously, I'm curious about what's happening, checking myself to see if my opinions are in the right place or not. Always a space to learn at the Clean Close. Please give me some support. I love, love, love the feedback we've received so far, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Now back to the show. Recently, you made a post and you asked, why don't the vast majority of MLS data licenses have expiration dates? What made you ask that? And what was the response you got? Was it a trick question?
No, it was not a trick question. It's just, number one, you use LinkedIn to ask these rhetorical questions because you want to start a conversation. And it was one of those things that I felt like somebody somewhere smarter than me, who's been doing this longer than me, the Victor Lunds of the world, can respond to me and say, well, here's the initial thought behind that. Because when I audit an MLS's data feed process, kind of look under the hood, so to speak, I look at their licenses. And again, going back to these licenses that were written back when I was a youngster or younger, the language is made for display. Made for an internet that was in 2006, 2008, which is not the internet we have today, or the use cases. So then if you look at the license and you look at that was signed by someone at realtor.com who may not even be alive anymore, and then you realize, well, this is not good, because who would sign a license agreement in perpetuity? Meaning you can back your truck up to my warehouse and pull out all this data forever. And so I just noticed that there was no expiration. So I just asked, why is that? And I had one person text me and say, it was done because the people who originally signed these licenses just thought, well, it's realtor.com. Like, we trust them when we never not trust them. So off it goes. And so no license, very few licenses across the country, I've done this a lot, have expiration dates. And it seems like a fundamental flaw. Wow. That's crazy. There are still MLSs that don't charge for their data, meaning that those trucks back up to their warehouse and pay no fee.
Wow, that is insane. So,
Courtney, do you know why this is so important?
I mean, I think I can see a million reasons why this is important, but what's your idea?
Because it's the truth. Because you can't go out and make up MLS data. It's true. And so what you want is verifiable. It's like why I don't care about Bitcoin. I don't know if it's true or not. What is it worth today? But I know that a gold bar is worth something, which is why there's a U.S. military installation around Fort Knox. Like, it's true, it's real, it's like, it's the thing. So sorry, I just had to use that,
Well, I love that. But I think, to me, like, as an agent, as a broker, the frustration is that when Zillow, who publicly said in 2012, like, we're never going to be a brokerage, and then they became a brokerage, there was inherently a conflict of interest there. And unfortunately, our MLSs took the side, the OG, like what you're talking about right now, this old school side of the argument when I brought up, and other people had this concern as well, like, hey, Zillow is now monetizing our information and our name's not even on the listing. Like, our name's not even in there. And if there were expiration dates on these contracts, which seems like a big oversight, then at least there'd be some leverage. So we could say, look, we're not going to renew unless you make these changes.
Right.
And to this day, we cannot personally market, which is ridiculous. Like everything's about branding. And the MLS's argument was, well, it will look messy if ACME has their logo on the bottom of their listing photos, and then that gets IDX to Coldwell Banker. It'll be confusing. But I'm like, well, what do you think Zillow is doing whenever they put all the Zillow stuff around our pictures and our data description and a button that says contact the agent? You know, they are essentially branding all over my listing. And I want the right to do that as well. I want people to be confused enough to say, oh, this says ACME, but I'm on Zillow. Maybe there's a different agent representing the seller than potentially the buyer. Right. This is still true to this moment. And Zillow's response to it is, if you look in their internal docs, they say they want to incentivize these partner relationships by giving the partners things that the MLS won't give them. One of those things being branded, like personally branded videos and that kind of thing. You could see it now, like it's out there. I just wonder, from your point of view, why hasn't there been more of an effort to either backdate these IDX agreements or really make some changes that would give agents the leverage they need over these IDX kind of display agreements, so that we, the people who are the actual dues-paying members of NAR, of MLS, of our local and state associations, so we feel represented. Because the subtext of all of this, Bill, just in straight language, is agents are getting screwed. We are getting screwed. We are the ones who are getting screwed. And despite our payments to all of these advocacy groups and to our utility provider, somehow we're getting the short end of the stick. And I think that needs to change. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I mean, like, how can we fix this?
I do. That was an incredible and very wide and deep scenario you just threw at me, and I have a great answer for you. Are you ready?
Let's go.
The MLS, let's imagine, I'll speak metaphorically for a moment. The MLS is a Home Depot, okay? And I'm a little door guy at Home Depot. You can probably look at me and tell that I'm not handy at all. I am a danger to myself when I have tools in my hand. So I go to the little door at Home Depot. I have a bulb, or I have a screw, or I have something like, patching drywall at the very most. And the MLS, if that's the Home Depot, is really good at serving me, the little door guy. So the local broker. This has been our historical wheelhouse, is that relationship. Okay. The rest of Home Depot, back where like the guys with hairy arms and like the 2x4s and all that stuff, that is really now what the MLS is. 2/3 of the activity that takes place at the MLS is in the back, the loading dock. I wrote about this, which we don't see, you don't see. And most of the MLSs are not equipped to even undertake. So the loading dock is run by Cotality or ICE or FBS or Rapatoni or one of these subcontractors. So when you log into your MLSs, you're not logging into the California Regional. You're logging into one of these products, Matrix or Paragon, one of those. Those companies actually run the Home Depot. The MLS just puts their sign out front. And so what you're saying is the needs that you have as an agent are really more like big door Home Depot needs. When you're saying, I need a field change, days on market sucks, the loading dock is broken, my listing's on Zillow, there's no one in the building to talk to you about this. They are not created to handle these kinds of problems. There's someone answering the phone.
And yet NAR keeps giving them more responsibilities, like delayed entry. Like, what person at the MLS is authorized to tell me how long it's going to take me to sell a $15 million listing? It might take a lot longer than a $100,000 listing.
But the value, but the relationship value that we can't overstate here is that you, Courtney, can walk into the front door of the MLS and raise hell. And I'm sure you have and should, and maybe continue to do that about your, but there's no door to knock on at Zillow. There's no door to knock on at Google. So
honestly, there's no door to knock on at the MLS either.
Well, I'm going to tell you that there is. And I'm going to tell you that if you want me to, I can put you in direct contact with anybody and you can yell and scream at them all you want. But there's a human being.
I've done it.
But I'm just saying that that's the relationship that still exists, even though they're not equipped. Their Home Depot currently The license is not up to date. The staffing is not up to date to handle the problems necessarily that Realtor.com and Zillow are creating. They're just not equipped. They were not designed to do this. But you,
So if
this is my thesis, is that you can
Yes.
still have recourse. You can still get yourself elected to the
think
board
so?
of directors, and you can have something changed.
Well, I got to give it to you for believing, being a believer. I feel a little bit more discouraged. I think that what you're saying actually makes more sense. So to me, now it's like I'm walking into the administrative offices that don't control the actual platform that has the problem. So how can they make changes if it's Matrix that really needs to make the changes? Who tells Matrix what to do? You know, who tells them what to do? Maybe it's not the MLS, and that's why they can't do anything about it.
Well, these companies that I just mentioned are data companies, and real estate is a sliver of their overall billion-dollar global picture. But I can certainly tell you that the people that I know that run these companies, the real estate divisions at Cotality and ICE, just to use two large examples, are 100% dedicated to the people who run the MLS. 100%. I mean, it's a very lucrative relationship between the MLS vendor and the MLS itself. Hundreds of thousands of agents paying, monthly dues.
And you don't think that we could, I mean, sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to cut you off, but you just said something real big, which is this is a lucrative relationship because of all the licensing fees, all the licensees are rather paying fees. You don't think that there is a better platform that could be invented that has better data and more standards and does not require as much out-of-pocket expense from agents and accomplishes the same exposure for ultimately who we serve, which is our seller clients with regard to our MLS listings? I mean, don't you think there could be a better platform for that?
I will tell you this. I think that what we have right now is not, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I wouldn't take the value of the MLS, which is, let's go back to what the MLS originally was, is you and a bunch of your friends getting together every week around a dinner table and putting your listings in the middle and selling and dealing and negotiating in that moment. That was early 1900s. That's what the MLS originally was. And that's what it still is. It's just a giant place where we all put our stuff in the middle. And for a very, very low fee, we get rules. So the agent across the street can't put a bunch of garbage in the MLS and then hurt your deal because it was not a 3-2, it was a 2-2. So I don't want to give Zillow that control. I don't want to give Google that control. I want to fix what we have. And I'm telling you, I have the deepest respect for the practitioner, especially in your cutthroat market, especially someone like you who's willing to get out here and talk about these issues in a very public forum. But I swear to you, there is someone who is willing to sit across the table from you and listen to your days on market complaint and do something about it. Like, you're not the only person that cares about it, is what I'm saying. You have no advocacy at Zillow. You have no advocacy at Google. You have an advocate at the MLS.
Well, I think that's an excellent place to leave it. I so appreciate you sharing all of your thoughts and opinions. It really matters to have people like you too engaging with us on the ground here. And I'd be really happy to have you back any old time on the Clean Clothes.
Oh my God,
Bill.
please.
Thank you so
please.
much.
It's an honor to be here, Courtney. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. I have to just say thank you so much to the guests that came in today and for you guys out there listening to these stories. The scams are very real, and it's some naivete. I was just ruminating on a professional development seminar that I went to many years ago, and the guy leading the seminar asked this question to the audience. He said, "Who promised you a perfect life?" It's like, nobody promised me a perfect life. Okay, so nobody promised you a perfect life. Why do you get so pissed off when somebody cuts you off in traffic? Like, why does your heart break when somebody that you care for doesn't care for you in the way you care for them, for example? Like, what is it that makes you feel disappointment and anger that things aren't the way you want them to be? And I feel like on some level that's relevant to the contractor scam conversation because, or the MLS in fact, because my naivete, my childlike belief in systems wants to trust that the people I pay to act on my behalf actually care about me. And I think what these cons are making me realize is that that whole entire paradigm probably has always been a flawed proposition, but now more than ever, I realize that I need to grow up. We all need to grow up and realize we do have some power in this. Wherever I'm spending the money is where my power is. And if I had to do it all over again, I would probably I would have not paid on the schedule. I would have been more in defense of myself. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do in the MLS conversation, even with this podcast, to say, hey, there are agents out here in the field and real shit is happening that's affecting us, and real choices are being made by people that are not necessarily acting with the agent's best interests in mind. In fact, I think there's a whole industry, a whole real estate, they call it prop tech industry, that really doesn't want the traditional real estate agent to even have a living in the next 6 years. In 2026, I'm making a commitment to accountability. And I don't just mean holding myself accountable. I mean holding the people and institutions that I pay, that are charged with caring for me, accountable. And that means sharing from an honest place, which is why I'm doing this podcast. That's why we're hearing these stories from real people in the field who are tackling these problems, these cons, and ultimately shaping the future of our industry. At the end of the day, I have to just ask, where in the puck is this headed? If you know what that reference is to, you know. We'll see you next time on the Clean Clothes. Bye.